You are listening to Talking Star Wars.
Hello, Talking Star Wars fans. I'm Alex,
And I'm Connor.
and today we have a special episode of Talking Star Wars where we are taking a leaf out of many comic book writers' caps and going to do our own What If episode.
Yes, there's talks of there being a Disney Plus Star Wars What If series. And for those of you not in the know, What If refers to a comic book series slash Marvel Disney Plus cartoon animated series, which is literally what if different events happened in the canon universe. And throughout the 80s comic book series and the most recent 2010s animated series, Disney and Marvel have had a lot of fun in engaging in different stories, such as what if Sharon Carter, or not Sharon Carter, Betsy Carter, who's the old
Peggy
Carter?
Carter. Peggy
Peggy
Carter.
Carter, yes. What if Peggy Carter was Captain America instead of Steve Rogers? So it sounds like Disney is willing to do this same sort of treatment for Star Wars, even though Star Wars has been doing this in the Dark Horse comics called Star Wars Infinities for at least a couple of decades ago by now.
Yeah, and the primary premise of a what if series like this is that the butterfly flaps its wings in some one different way, and that there's one key difference, one person that has changed, one event that has shifted, one bit of the universe that is slightly very in a slightly in a different way, and that sends it off careening on an entirely different trajectory, with ripple effects being felt throughout the timeline, but all can be traced back to this one key difference, either in a
Mhm.
character, an event, or a piece of the setting.
And the Infinities comic books did a great job of taking that one event and showing, say, if something happened in A New Hope, it would unfold into what happened in The Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, just to give you a full picture of, what would occur if there were some small changes made. I've read those comic books, but I'm not referencing them whatsoever. I just looked at the canon Skywalker saga and tried to just pick out some individual moments that could allow for some pretty interesting changes. So it's a bit of a different take where Alex and I did not talk about our own individual changes beforehand. So I'm pretty excited to see what you have to come up with as far as the little butterfly effect changes go.
Yeah, so the rules are we're doing the in release order, the Skywalker Saga movies, picking one key difference that would change the movies, and we'll briefly talk about the implications that we see. Connor and I in the Star Wars universe are not generally like, oh, we should have a Star Wars multiverse. We're a fan of a
Mhm.
unified canon, but this is more of a fun thought experiment and to see how well the universe can hold together. If key differences were to happen, how that would affect the world building and the storytelling. So more of a fun thought exercise and just playing around with the tropes and characters of the setting than anything like a deep dive into the canon today. We hope everyone enjoys our thoughts about the what if elements of Star Wars and the Skywalker saga.
And so to begin, if we were to start with A New Hope, I have one uh I don't know, taking a look at the entire Star Wars canon, one key change that would I would say force the rest of the films to shift pretty substantially, but I'm curious, for Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope, what was your what if idea?
I'm going to make you go first, Connor.
Ooh. Let's see if we have a similar idea. I'm also excited to see if we came across some of the, I don't know, similar thought planes in the world between worlds. But I was wondering, what if Ahsoka Tano were to intervene at some point during A New Hope?
That is a very interesting. So mine is different. So I think we can talk
Mhm.
through the implications of yours. So
Excellent.
we already know, due to the effect of Star Wars Rebels, that Ahsoka Tano was heavily involved in the Rebel Alliance. She was Agent Fulcrum. She was one of the founding members of the Rebel Alliance before it was even the Rebel Alliance. She was one of the only Force sensitives that were able to advise individuals such as Leia, Mon Mothma, Bail Organa, particularly working for the latter. And she had close relationships with all of those people. However, before she could assist in the direct confrontation with the Emperor and Vader, she was literally trapped in time for years.
Hmm.
She was trapped in a lethal confrontation with Darth Vader in a collapsing Sith temple and was trapped in a sort of pocket dimension called the World Between Worlds, which to her felt like mere moments, but for her was more than a year. And so by the time she emerged, the Battle of Yavin had already happened. Uh, do, do we know that for certain? Do we know the point in time when Ezra returned her
I
to?
That's a good question. I would imagine that anything at the end of Rebels would take place before A New Hope. It's in that sort of nebulous prior to A New Hope territory that Rogue One exists in, probably before that as well. So I would think that by the time that A New Hope started, she would be returned to the regular universe at large.
So do we imagine that it is her confrontation with Vader that causes her to not intervene, where she no longer, as we see in the Ahsoka show, she no longer trusts herself or her teachings, knowing that her own master fell to the dark side, and so she steps back from being Agent Fulcrum and doesn't emerge to take a hand in galactic affairs until the war against the Empire has been won?
I think until Dave Filoni changes that stance, that's very accurate because, yeah, it seems as though she's either uh, entranced with trying to figure out the secrets of this dark side temple, or if she's just taking a step back also because she has realized that her master and sort of her center, her foundation as a post Jedi being Ronan goes is also the most diabolical villainous being in the galaxy. That would also
Yeah,
be traumatic. So until we get
yeah.
that canon story, I think that's where we're planted. So I'm interested to see if she returns. I What I came up with was that she would appear at some point after Obi-Wan Kenobi sacrificed himself in the battle to Vader, and when Luke, Leia joined the rebels, and uh, I can't remember the individual man who's there giving the spiel about the Death Star plans, but I imagine that Ahsoka
That
would
would be
be
General
there.
Dozana.
Yes, that fellow. I would imagine that she would be returning to the rebellion at some point in order to uh, discuss, I don't know, present matters and to get caught up. So I don't know if it would be so much an influence on the rest of this film as it would be in Empire Strikes Back, where instead of going to Yoda, Luke may have learned more from Ahsoka Tano during this particular time in the Galactic Civil War. And from
Yeah,
there,
I
it's
imagine.
it's more nebulous. I don't know if that would lead to different events occurring or the same events occurring, but it would just be a different take than learning from Grandmaster Yoda.
Well, I imagine lots of implications for Ahsoka returning. She might refuse to train Luke.
Hmm.
As she refuses to train Grogu, she would definitely join the Rebel Alliance. I don't see if she came back. If she decides not to take that step away, I think she remains committed. She could potentially die in the assault on the Death Star,
Hmm.
but she could also fight Vader off at Hoth. He could split Vader's attention because he would both had both his son and his former apprentice to focus on, and potentially split Vader's focus from his single-minded obsession with finding who Luke is, which is one that allows him to start forming his own power base apart from the Emperor, as we see in the
Hmm.
Darth Vader comics. So I think there's lots of implications to Ahsoka surviving. But I think if she directly involves herself in the rebellion, I don't see her surviving to the end of it in the way that she did. I think she was in too damaged of a state. I think she would have started taking on every dangerous mission she could, almost kind of how Ezra and Kanan did in
Hmm.
the sort of later days of the Empire. And it cost Kanan his life, and Ezra was falling down a dark path and almost died several times. So I see her going out in a blaze of glory or being hunted down either by Vader again or by Palpatine himself.
I can definitely see her if I were to just invent a canon moment. I think that she would have prevented Boba Fett from escaping with Han Solo and Carbonite, but I think that would have been perhaps to her sacrifice. Um, at that point in time, I don't know how skilled and in prowess Boba Fett was. I know that by the time of Return of the Jedi, someone can just hit his jetpack and he would go careening into a Sarlacc pit. But prior to that point, I would be interested in seeing a conflict between him and Ahsoka. But I do agree that she would uh, fall similarly to Obi-Wan Kenobi for the sake of Luke's potential development. But we
Yeah.
still don't really know where Ahsoka is going to land as far as a storyline goes, as far as a plot line in the greater Star Wars story. So I think there's just still a lot of room left to speculate. But as far as changes to episode four, what did you have in mind?
So for episode four, my thought of the butterfly flapping its wings, the what if, would be what if Obi-Wan Kenobi survived, General Kenobi himself then becoming a key
Ooh,
figure in the Rebel Alliance going forward.
yeah.
Yeah, so Obi-Wan Kenobi remains a presence in Luke's life, of course. He appears to him on Hoth to give him advice and advise him to seek Yoda. He appears again on Dagobah. He remains Luke's mentor as one with the Force, but he has abandoned all worldly concerns. But I think if General Kenobi joins the rebellion again, lightsaber wielding, hero of the Clone Wars, with all of his tactical and strategic knowledge, his negotiation ability, the old friends and favors he has to call upon, and the deep knowledge he has of Anakin Skywalker's tactics as Vader, I see him taking a very prominent role in the rebellion. I think as a negotiator and as a Jedi, he has skills, but he is also a skilled tactician and strategist, who's also force sensitive. So, as saw in the Kenobi show, Vader would be obsessed with finding him, and again, that splits Vader's attention away from Luke. I think Luke then becomes Obi-Wan's Padawan, in a way
Hmm.
even more directly than he was then, and Obi-Wan gives him more direct instruction. Because while Yoda finished his training, Yoda and Luke never really saw eye to eye, even when they're older. In episode 8, Yoda and Luke are still talking through their
Hmm.
differences as far as teaching and worldview. So
Luke
while they're
still
sort
has
of
so much to learn. Correct. Yeah.
yeah, so by default they ended up having to be together. We know in some other ancillary media Yoda would have preferred to train Leia instead.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, I think the implication of general, he'll say he has this confrontation with Vader. They fight themselves to a stalemate. Something explodes. Obi-Wan manages to escape instead, and then joins the rebellion not only as a Jedi Knight but as a general. So I see Luke probably still struggling, but in very different ways. Does he feel overshadowed by Obi-Wan? Does later on, if Obi-Wan is still alive when Luke learns that Obi-Wan lied about his father, does that send Luke careening into the dark side and siding with Vader? Because here's his living mentor who lied about the most important thing in his life.
Hmm.
Or does Luke harbor a secret resentment? And how does um, Vader's offer land to a Luke that has been betrayed by his living mentor and not simply his dead one?
Yeah, I totally dig this because I want to lean into two separate elements. One element is that uh, by the time that we receive the Kenobi Disney Plus show, we know that Leia and Kenobi have established history. So what's that first interaction like when Leia gets to speak to Obi-Wan Kenobi? This uh, I'm not going to say old friend, but this old connection who saved her through I'm going to say eight different disastrous ends because she was always in peril, no matter what the episode was. Um, but that's the first question. I think that that would lead into some sort of master and apprentice uh, favoring of Obi-Wan for Leia, and Luke might be isolated because of that. But at the same time, Obi-Wan Kenobi is pretty much out for the murder of Darth Vader. He doesn't believe that there's any kind of reconciliation, no kind of salvation. So if he does have Leia or Luke at his side, what sort of end do we see for Darth Vader from that?
Yeah, I'm not sure Obi-Wan offers Anakin nearly the same type of redemption that Luke offers him. I don't
Mhm.
think Vader turns on the Emperor with Obi-Wan confronting him, and what effect that has on Luke to establish a new Jedi Order or to become a Jedi himself. I'm not certain. because realizing his mentor was imperfect and lied to him is an important plot point for Luke, and
Mhm.
struggling with his meaning of his father. And how does Leia grow into leader of the rebellion if there's Obi-Wan Kenobi here to both lean on, but perhaps overshadow other
Mhm.
individuals? Does Han Solo stick around if there's this Jedi Master who's now leading things?
Right. What kind of faith shock does Han Solo have when he has an Obi-Wan Kenobi around him who's constantly proving that there is a force, there is a Jedi Order that combats with his like tried and true beliefs.
Yeah, and we know that Chewbacca even had a close relationship with the Jedi Order. So Chewbacca never really had much opportunity to talk to Obi-Wan, other than reconnecting the cantina, and is the one who convinced Han Solo to take the job in the first place. But Obi-Wan has connections. I mean, he was well known among the Mandalorians. He was well known
Mhm.
among other places. So I can see him having a significant impact on the rebellion as a whole, even beyond the direct personal impact of our main characters.
Mhm.
So, but again, I'm not certain that Luke survives without falling to the dark side with a
Right.
living Obi-Wan who didn't come clean to him about Vader. Because
Mhm.
Obi-Wan still could have told Luke the truth when dead on Dagobah and didn't. So I can't see a living Obi-Wan Kenobi being more forthcoming.
Oh no. I think if anything, there would be some sort of tragic shock that Luke would learn in the presence of both Obi-Wan and Kenobi, where I'm sorry, in both Kenobi and Vader, where Vader would tell the truth in a moment where Kenobi would be concealing the truth and win Luke over for that sake. So Kenobi would have been an excellent asset for the rebellion, but definitely if he survived, it would be a detriment to Luke.
All right. Well, I think that is a couple of good what if scenarios about A New Hope, both introducing, basically showing the impact that Jedi can have on basically the trajectory of galactic history.
Mhm.
One if Ahsoka joined up, and one if Obi-Wan maintained a key figure. Both figures from the past Jedi Order with close connections with the core cast and how that would
Mhm.
impact things going forward. So both of our minds went to having a Jedi around, in a world
Right.
where most of the Jedi have been killed. One who is younger, one who is older, but both the two other people other than Padme, Luke and Leia, the closest people
Mhm.
to Anakin Skywalker that are still alive.
And still at the same points would be, I don't know, casting different detrimental relationships for our characters. But episode five has already come up with a what if for. I mean, it's rife for alteration, but it's such a strong film. Uh, and going first, what would you say your change would be?
All right, so episode 5, The Empire Strikes Back. My what if would be, what if Leia joined Luke on training in the Force on Dagobah with Yoda?
Ooh. So what event would lead her to being tuned into joining Luke at this point?
So it would be her realizing that she is Force sensitive in the events between episodes 4 and 5. So
Mhm.
something in a series of events or some inciting event would have realized that she suspects that she may also be a Jedi, or have Force sensitive abilities. Not necessarily realizing her connection with Luke, um, but either a comment made by Obi-Wan Kenobi, um, or a Luke and her are in a fraught enough situation to realize that Leia has force sensitivity as well. And so when he tells her, "Oh, I know of a Jedi Master to go train with," Leia decides that the best thing she can do for the rebellion is to also become a Jedi,
Mhm.
or at least learn how to use these powers. So leaving the rebellion in the hands of Mon Mothma and, other trusted advisors in the wake of the Battle of Hoth so that they can regroup and eventually fight back. She then departs with Luke, joins him on Dagobah, uh, and ends up exploring the ways of the Force with Yoda, who may or may not disclose to them their familial relation. But Yoda, as is shown in the short story collection From Another Point of View, had always planned on himself training Leia while Obi-Wan trained Luke so that they could
Mhm.
each impart their knowledge. But then, when Obi-Wan died and Leia did not come into her force sensitivity as strongly as Luke did, Obi-Wan convinced Yoda that he needed to train Luke instead, which we can argue the veracity of each of those viewpoints if we can. But
Sure.
Yoda was totally down to train Leia. and I can see him definitely doing so and wanting them to have a sense of partnership and community to keep each of them from falling to the dark side.
I think that
So, what do you
are
think about this idea?
I think that there are just so many wonderful possibilities and bonding between Luke and Leia that we didn't really see in the canon series. But I think that with certainty in this universe, Han Solo would be 100% dead. Uh, Han Solo doesn't do well without some romantic direction in his life, because I think that we see any time that he is without that kind of inclination, he's always ending up with Conja Club and the Guarvian Death Gang. But when he has some direction of romance and love in his life, he becomes a general in the rebellion.
Yeah, I don't even see that necessarily needs a romantic entanglement for Han,
Mhm.
but Han doesn't do causes. Han does
Mhm.
personal loyalty to individuals.
Yeah.
And so the easiest way to get Han's personal loyalty is through maybe perhaps a romantic connection because he becomes very personally loyal to Kira. He becomes very
Mhm.
personally loyal to Leia. And then he eventually does become loyal to the rebellion as a whole. But Leia was the linchpin, the weakness in his defenses to then becomes loyal to the rebellion as a whole. And even then,
Mhm.
we see that that cracks and fades. He's not particularly loyal to the New Republic as an idea, but he
Mhm.
is loyal to Leia as an individual and a senator within it and her goals. So he's
Right.
always backing Leia to the hilt. So if Leia is going to do this, I agree with you. I think Han Solo is either out of the picture or dead.
Yes.
Perhaps they never connected romantically, and so Han goes back to his ways of smuggling, and so or they have a messy breakup, and rather than being sort of a slap kiss kiss sort of will they won't they thing, it becomes a you're dead to me. I'm going to go with Luke instead.
Mhm.
Um,
And then from
fight.
that point, he's in like he can die in or he gets out of the asteroid, the worm, but he ends up on Cloud City, and like there's no sense that Lando is trying to get with his woman, so his guard is down. So I think that he falls right into the trap that Vader's setting up as pretty much a prototype to the carbonite freezing. And instead of being cocky and saying, "Oh, you love me, I know. I'm gonna survive this carbonite freezing." He tries to fight it, and he gets slashed with a lightsaber, blasted with a pistol, and I still think
Or
that Luke
just
would probably try to save his friend, and perhaps would fall to his fate and be
yeah,
frozen
I
in
mean,
carbonite and have Leia forced to save him from Jabba's palace.
well, even if that doesn't happen, let's say that Leia and Luke are both have lightsabers, train with Yoda on Dagobah, and both of
Hmm.
them sense Han in trouble. Leia turns out is still in love with him. And Luke, it means Luke's best friend. Yeah,
Hmm.
and there's no way he's cutting a deal with the Empire. He's one of the six people that blew up the Death Star. He's
Right.
public enemy number three after Leia and Luke. So he is certainly on the death block. And so then wielding lightsabers together, go to confront their father, who has no inkling that Leia is also his daughter,
Hmm.
may or may not sense this via the Force, but will certainly know that she has been trained by Yoda. Um, them confronting him together, do they have any more chance of surviving than Luke attacking by himself? I don't think
Feel
so.
like Leia may have some inclination, but honestly, and this isn't to be any kind of sexist or anything like that, but I feel as though Leia has more temptation from the dark side than Luke has. I just feel much more frustration in her character. There's so much optimism in Luke, and with Leia, it's so much more of a feistiness of veracity.
Well, I don't see Leia having the ability to manage attachment in the way that a Jedi needs to. She is
Hmm.
attached to causes and attached to people. So I can
Yes.
see her either being vulnerable to falling to the dark side, or she's also a better tactician by far than Luke
Hmm.
Skywalker. I
Oh,
can
for
say her,
sure.
yeah, I can make her seeing the decision that they need to retreat or Does Han Solo get killed in front of them, and is that what causes Leia to call upon the dark side and attempt to kill her father? Who
Mhm.
knows? But I just find the idea of having the force sensitive twins running around, both struggling with the dark side, both trained by
Mhm.
Yoda, quickly
Trying to
slipping out
save
of his
Han, but
control.
failing.
Yeah, yeah. And what effect does that have on them? Does it set them in opposition to each other? Does Luke become a hermit early? Does Leia try to be both a political leader and a Jedi, with Luke disagreeing with that decision, and it causes them to have a falling out?
Mhm.
Does Yoda side with one or the other, and the other then has to leave and find their own way? So I think there's a lot of interesting things that could happen, particularly with Han as this linchpin character. But
Right.
just having Leia explore her force sensitive powers earlier, while Yoda is still alive and not rely on Luke, I think sets them, rather than like Luke as the Jedi and Leia as his sister, setting them both up as Jedi, and I
Mhm.
think sets them on more of a collision course in an interesting way.
I would definitely enjoy seeing this come to fruition in the Star Wars What If series. And my take isn't too far off. It's just, I think, delayed a chapter. My take was, what if, uh, because Han Solo was kind of like the prototype carbonite freezing, what if Luke was subsequently frozen? And now we have a dual set of trophies with both Luke and Han in carbonite. Luke is no longer free to continue his Jedi path. Where does that leave
So,
Leia as far as the battle against the Empire go?
so this is where Han is frozen, and Luke, instead of force jumping out of the carbonite freeze or and
Is
escaping with the
frozen.
help, is frozen as well and taken to the
Hmm.
Emperor.
Exactly.
Well, I think Luke is either brainwashed or falls to the dark side, in this
Mhm.
situation, or remains tortured in a far former inquisitorious fortress for years. I don't see. He is then, once he's in the clutches of the Emperor is never letting him go, whether
Hmm.
he breaks or does not. And I am not certain that, without coming to terms with who his father is and having the time that the becoming a fully realized Jedi by the time of Return of the Jedi, I don't see Luke being able to resist the temptation in the same way he does in the Return of the Jedi.
He's very
Especially
impetuous
because,
in Empire Strikes Back. He's willing to go try to seek uh, really the status of savior by trying to protect his friends from the Empire when he's not ready. So at that point, his state of mind would have been surely to try to fold into as much power as he can get in order to save those that he loves, just like his father before him.
yeah, so if they're both frozen in carbon, I mean, that's two of the five primary leaders of the rebellion and two of the best
Hmm.
three field agents the rebellion has, including their only Jedi and both Leia's primary love interest and anchor,
Hmm.
and one of the best captains that had the growing loyalty of much of the Rebel Alliance. I'm not sure the Rebel Alliance survives without both of them. Leia
Hmm.
would obviously keep things going. She would then take on more control herself. At that point, it might even be a little bit of what I talked about. Does Yoda contact Leia and try to train her as a Jedi?
Hmm.
Calling back to, if that boy fails, there's a last hope, and Yoda saying, no, there is another.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Right.
I see Leia ending up in Dagobah with a sick and dying Yoda, but learning what she can of the Force from him and the Force ghost of Obi-Wan Kenobi, taking up Luke's discarded lightsaber that he, entrusted to her, and then
Hmm.
does she have to pick her brother or her love to try to free first? I don't think she can do both. She can't go against the Hutts and the Empire at the same time.
Save her love, save her brother, save her father. It's, yeah.
It is very clear in Bloodline, the novel, and in other
Mm.
works, um, uh, such as The Princess and the Scoundrel. Leia has no interest in saving her father. I mean, he tortured her on the first Death Star. He blew up her planet in front of her, well, with
Hmm.
Tarkin. Uh, she hates Vader to her dying day. She never forgives or is interested in forgiving him in the way that Luke does, which is why I think a Leia with no compass left to her is a very dangerous person. I think she could eventually become. I mean, she's almost got a Galadriel style quality to her, where she could easily become a dark Jedi or a dark Force user opposing the Emperor by any means necessary. I
So
think
this could be the
that
darkest universe that we end up with.
yeah, I could see Leia going full Saw Gerrera with a lightsaber and the dark side at her command. She is a Skywalker after all.
Hmm.
She is alongside Vader and Palpatine, the most powerful Force user left in the galaxy. So and if she confronts Vader, she doesn't try to turn him back to the light side. She doesn't surrender to him. She orders an orbital strike to blow Vader up, or she kills him out of hand. And if she's given a choice between falling to the dark side or killing the Emperor, she kills the Emperor.
Hmm.
She doesn't hesitate. And then I'm seeing her just taking that throne herself.
Right.
So this future to me is Leia, Supreme Chancellor Leia, sitting in the throne of a dying Palpatine, his blood still on her hands. Um, her husband
She's
lost to her, her
right.
brother lost to her, because there's
Ordering
no
the
way that,
next global strike.
yeah, and it's like, where's the next Imperial holdout? Smash a moon into the surface.
Hmm. So yeah, very negative. Not exactly anticlimactic, but some sort of negative climax. I'm glad to come up with that horrific read. But then we come across Return of the Jedi. Um, the take that I have is slightly adjusted compared to this, and it's that if Luke and Leia cannot save Han from carbonite, what does the rebellion face without a Han Solo at their back?
Okay, so this is Episode 6, Return of the Jedi. What if Han Solo dies in Jabba's palace?
Hmm.
So I think this is different than our former question because we still have the time. We still have Luke becoming a fully realized Jedi. We
Hmm.
still have Luke and Leia able to lean on each other. We then do lose Han Solo's perspective, down earth quality. We have the guilt that would eat at both of them.
Hmm.
I think this probably doesn't have a huge impact on the rebellion, but has an enormous impact on our principal characters.
And it
So
has large ramifications for the future of the series as well, because there, at this point is no Ben Solo to cause a future, uh, Knights of Ren First Order rebellion against the New Republic.
yeah, but maybe this also then depresses Luke to the point where he does his exiled Jedi act early rather than establishing a new Jedi order.
Hmm.
Because then he doesn't have a force sensitive nephew to train and nudge him into needing to create a new Jedi order. So if Han Solo dies, I don't think, the Battle of Endor goes any differently.
Hmm.
Uh, Maybe the casualties are worse. You don't have many commanders with Han Solo's ability, but you have someone else step up into the role of leading the ground assault. I mean, Luke is at
Rex.
this point a
Hmm.
incredibly skilled small unit commander himself. So he and Leia managed the infiltration of the planet just fine without Han. Maybe there
And
are
we
more
do get
casualties. Yeah.
we get one hint that Captain Rex is amongst the rebellion troops with one uh I don't know, just extra who has a large white bushy beard, just like Captain slash Commander Rex.
Yeah, so maybe Rex steps up in canon to take also command, or we get another captain who steps up to take command of the strike force. I think the strike force is still successful even without Han. The Ewoks will still turn because Leia was their primary linchpin of loyalty, and Luke can still pull off everything he does. But I
Hmm.
think there's this shadow, this pall. There is Lando still leads the assault with the Millennium Falcon, but he's now inherited the Millennium Falcon rather than having it gifted to him. Chewbacca has been probably his co-pilot rather than Nia Nub because Chewbacca, uh, while loyal to Leia and Luke, probably retreats home to the Millennium Falcon if Han is dead.
Hmm.
So, so I think yeah, the primary implications are less the immediate impact on Return of the Jedi, more in the future. Does Leia fall in love again, or does she just her entire life become rebuilding the New Republic? Luke,
Or
does
does
he
she
just keep?
fold into the Jedi Order? Is this what she needs? She no longer has that human attachment, so instead of starting a family, instead of being attached to the idea of the New Republic, does she like fully immerse herself into the Force?
Yeah, that could be, and I think that actually might be a larger and more successful Jedi Order. But without Leia as part of the New Republic, I think things
Hmm.
get even worse. I mean, Leia helped avert several of the crises we see in the Aftermath novel.
Right.
I think the New Republic fragments much earlier under the Imperial Remnant without Leia at the helm. And I see maybe we follow the Jedi having to step in. There's Luke, there's his disciples, there's Leia. I mean, eventually it's probably going to see the son of Hera and Kanan, Jason Syndulla, needing to be Padawan to someone. We already know from the Rise of Kylo Ren comic that there were more than a dozen Force sensitive students that Luke
Hmm.
had. So it's not like Kylo or Ben Solo was the only one, but and Leia is of course going to be much more logistically and organized about it. She's going to send seekers out to find all the Force sensitive children. If she becomes leader of the Jedi Order, she is not only going to do it to the best of her personal ability, but put institutions in place
Yeah.
to make it the best. So without Han
Maybe a
Solo,
little militant as well.
yeah, it's
She's
an
not afraid
evocative,
to do whatever she can in order to save everybody's skins.
yeah. So it's an evocative question, but that is my take. Without Han Solo,
Hmm.
I think there's a Luke and Leia both commit more to either to the Jedi Order or Leia goes all in on the New Republic
Hmm.
and never has any children herself.
So yeah, it's one of those fun, far-reaching questions where it's just, say the opening third didn't go as successfully as the Rebels had planned. But as far as your changes go for Return of the Jedi, what did you have in mind?
So this is a what if I think many people have thought before, and it's pretty straightforward. But my what if for episode 6, Return of the Jedi, is what if Luke fell to the dark side and took his place as Palpatine's apprentice?
Would he have, would Darth Vader still be around in this vision?
So this is where if things go according to Palpatine's plan. Luke
Hmm.
does not reject Palpatine's goading. He kills Vader in front of Palpatine as Palpatine goads him to do, realizing that he has called upon his anger and his hatred, where Palpatine has been foreseeing his new apprentice far younger and more powerful. And Luke, twisted by the dark side, overcome by Palpatine's influence and manipulation, then becomes the new Sith apprentice himself and joins Palpatine. Perhaps eventually overthrowing Palpatine, but falling to the dark side and becoming like his father before him, uh, a dangerous and powerful Sith, another line of Skywalkers, um, potential chosen one, now twisted into darkness.
So this may be quite possibly the most negative future that we have. At this point, if Luke were to uh, overcome his father and then fall to the Emperor's temptation, I I guess my first question is that the Emperor did say that if Luke agreed to fall to his influence, that all of Luke's friends would be safe. Would the Emperor allow this to happen, or would there be something else that Luke would have to uh, witness as far as the horrors of the Empire go?
So Palpatine was all about giving half promises and half truths.
Hmm.
Uh, he told Anakin he could help him save his wife, and that was a lie. So I think he would want to keep Luke under wraps. I think that Palpatine would underestimate Luke the same way he underestimates Anakin. I don't think
Hmm.
Palpatine survives the long term. I think Palpatine would have more time to continue Operation Necromancer and eventually emerge as a clone version, but I don't think Palpatine survives 5 years with Luke as his apprentice.
Oh no,
So
Luke
I think,
has far too much ambition.
yeah, at this point, if Luke is willing to kill his father and he's twisted up inside by that, he does not have the same amount of emotional hangups or trauma that Anakin did that crippled him. So I think Luke quickly surpasses where Anakin Skywalker was as his apprentice. And it's some night, whether Palpatine foresees it or not. Perhaps they have a confrontation. Perhaps he does it in Palpatine's sleep. Perhaps Luke blows up his ship. But Luke somehow kills Palpatine, or at least this version of Palpatine, or thinks he killed Palpatine.
Hmm.
Palpatine then soul retreats to its dark side nexus on Exegol, awaiting to be reborn in a clone. And
Biding his
that
time.
Yeah, Operation Cinder still happens, but instead of targeting the New Republic, it now targets the Empire that Luke is now attempting to wield himself as new Emperor. Uh, and I think Luke does at that point. The sunk cost fallacy goes in full effect. Luke, even if the Emperor kept his promises and didn't directly kill Han Solo or Leia or the Rebellion, they're all disarmed. They're all in prison. Leia will never forgive Luke.
Mm-mm.
Does Leia then
Yeah.
become the primary antagonist? The only person capable of then facing Luke in combat is Leia. So does the
Mhm.
Force Ghost of Obi-Wan and Yoda begin to mentor Leia on how to confront her brother? I don't know, but Luke is scarily powerful. So if he falls to the dark side, I'm not. I mean, we're looking at an empire under Luke's control extending for another several decades at the very least. I don't
Mhm.
see anyone else able to overcome him, and I don't see Luke is not going to have the same obsession Palpatine did with his same personal power and with his pet projects like Project Necromancer. Luke rules with an very effective iron fist. He's a charismatic and talented leader. He inspires loyalty. So, whereas the Emperor works through bureaucracy and sort of this cult of personality by far, Luke does some First Order style personal fascism. There are posters of Luke's face on the wall. There is the fist of Skywalker guarding him as his own Varangian guard. Uh, he goes full in very early, recognizing what he needs to leverage, and I believe is far more effective than Palpatine would, taking much more direct influence. Palpatine couldn't be bothered to do a lot of the direct governance. He was still very effective, but always wanted to rule at one remove, play the factions against each other. Playing the long game, Luke
Mhm.
consolidates power much more ruthlessly as Dark Luke or Darth Skywalker or whatever we call him, and wields that power to great effect. Does someone try to assassinate him? Does he survive long? I'm not sure. But this is what I envision in a universe, in a galaxy ruled by a Sith Luke.
If Han and Leia survive, I like to think that they would keep the rebellion alive somehow, uh, where there would be no influence from Luke on their child. So we get a Ben Solo that is possibly more of a smuggler rebellion character than a Jedi. And I don't know.
Yeah.
It would
Do we
be
get,
an
do we get,
entirely different universe to unfold from there.
yeah, do we get chosen one nephew, Ben Solo, the actual chosen one of the Skywalker, in a dramatic confrontation in Luke Skywalker's throne room against
Hmm.
the Emperor himself, having been trained by his mother, who knew she didn't have the power to fight against her own brother.
Hmm.
With the blaster given by his father before he died in a last
Ooh.
mission, fighting,
And the bowcaster that his Wookiee uncle gave him before a moon fell on him.
yeah, with a ragtag group of friends there to overthrow the Emperor and
Hmm.
restore balance to the galaxy. Must cast
This
the
might,
kyber crystal
yeah,
into the fire.
this may be the most fantastical and like almost optimistic future that the Star Wars universe has, but this period hasn't really been ventured into in canon at this point.
Yeah, so that's my what if for Return of the Jedi. Luke Skywalker falling to the dark side, and then eventually killing Palpatine and taking over.
Yeah, I think that we can take this format and reflect it upon the prequel trilogy and the sequel trilogy. Um, so I would say look forward to those episodes in the future.
Yeah, well, thank you for joining us for the original trilogy and our what if scenarios. We'll definitely continue this in the future. If you have any other thoughts about what if inflection points, feel free to drop those in our Reddit at reddit.com/r/talking Star Wars.
We'll see you sometime soon in a galaxy right here.